I'll give you some brief background on Lance. He's an award-winning political strategist and pollster who has conducted hundreds of polls in many of America's leading corporations. He's very, very involved in the political scene, including doing work for Barry Goldwater, Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, Jack Kemp, George W. Bush, and was a senior advisor to John McCain's early campaign. Tarrance, he founded and managed Tarrance Associates for 10 years, and then he sold it to Gallup, later becoming their managing partner of Gallup in China, spending time over there. He's authored two previous books of political polling, and in April of 2013, he was inducted into the Association of Political Consultants Hall of Fame for his outstanding contribution. What's important additionally in that is he was nominated by Roger Ailes and was it Charlie Black that nominated him for that position, which are pretty big names in the history of politics and news in this country. Now, Lance is a friend. I first met Lance in the governor's mansion in North Carolina at a wedding. And that was the first time I met him. Then I moved down here. And we've been playing a lot of golf ever since. Him mostly better than mine. But he enjoys it. He's very competitive, and that's why he likes to do it. And even though he is technically retired, he likes to keep his hand in, and he loves to compete. And he's been here before and has spoken to us, and a lot of his advice we've taken to heart. I don't know, one night he talked if you're really good in one corner, you can do very well in the rest of the area. Now, if you want to reflect back on the Montgomery, on the Lone Star College, we were very strong in our corner, and we carried the whole thing. And it's because of, and now it's up to us to expand away from there. But without further ado, I want to introduce my friend Lance Tarrance.
Read somewhere where Dick Cheney was always criticized when he would give a speech. They'd say he really gave a briefing. And he knew so much encyclopedically about what's going on in the country. I'll probably do a little of that tonight. I want to say something before we get started, though, that I really believe strongly in the two-party system, and I really believe in regenerating that party system, hopefully on the conservative side, every generation, certainly within 2 generations. And we've had that. If you look back in history, there was a tremendous movement, we'll call it the free enterprise movement, that came in with Goldwater in the 60s, and it started changing the system. And there were a lot of country club Republicans that said they didn't care for these people. Remember the Rockefeller crowd out of the Northeast that literally not only denigrated Goldwater but tried to make him something he wasn't. And then it didn't take much longer before the Reagan Revolution came in with new evangelicals and a lot of Reagan Democrats, both coming in at the same time to force the system into a new equilibrium. And that lasted for a while, and believe it or not, Ross Perot's crowd in 1992 had a lot to do with regenerating. If you don't believe that, ask the new congressman that got elected in 1994. So every so often, generational forces in play cause parties to change. Same thing on the Democratic side. You go back to McGovern's time and so forth and so on. So I think it's very important for the Tea Party to do what it is doing. I'm a big favorite of the Tea Party. I've given you some advice on political engineering, how I would direct the group from time to time on these voting behavior. So tonight I want to do something a little different. I have written a book recently, it was late last fall, called How Republicans Can Win in a Changing America. And I will talk about that a little bit. To me, it's pretty standard operating procedure. Republicans have missed their targets a lot lately. We used to win all the close elections for a variety of good reasons. Some of the migration of these new voters into the party, some of it just better technology, some of it that we had certain issues that coalesced at the right time in the right place. But we've lost a lot of close elections. And they haven't been as big as the press has made them. They're all in the 52-48 range, but I'd rather be on 52 than 48. And incidentally on that, we need to take a look at the election tonight over in Florida. It's a harbinger of us to the 14 cycle. We'll probably know about 8:30 tonight. That's 9:30 in the Tampa area. That's a special election for Bill Young's seat, and everybody in Washington believes it's the first red flag that everybody has to bow to see what's going to happen. And I will tell you a little bit of why I wrote the book. I was disappointed that we haven't won some of these close elections, and so I took my 30 years or so of background and sort of put down formulaically certain things that we used to do to win and that we've forgotten. A lot of the friends, and I'm not going to be super critical, but friends that I've grown up with over the last 35 years or so that are in Washington now, lobbyists, political consultants, what have you. Back when I was going, they were third string. And what I mean by that is that in terms of the Peter Pencil, they've worked their way up. They're in good spots. They're good people. But I haven't seen the come from behind Brett Favre kind of quarterbacking that I'm used to. And you can feel these things building. I feel very good about the momentum I feel for 14. But I've stated when I had that Fox interview, they said, what's the number one thing that you would suggest? And I said, basically, we better put the 14 and 16 elections in a package. It can't be done piecemeal. We tried that in 2010. It didn't work. We should have a 3-year package for the National Party to try to bring back more conservatives into power, et cetera, not just this election. So with that as a background, I thought I'd mention a couple of things that I think makes the Tea Party different. And you know, in terms of vote determinants, and that's my whole lifetime, the career was built around not only quantifying and inventorying vote determinants. I said, I vote this way and not that way for this reason. And that's one of the most complex decisions the brain makes, is how to vote. As you well know, we have social bases, whether you came from a rural area, an urban area, you have bases of religiosity, you have all kinds of variables that go into that decision. It creates a gigantic psychological matrix in your brain, and most of the most powerful scientists yet have said they can only account for maybe about 30 or 40% of the vote. And a lot of it's personality, a lot of it's whim, some of it's emotion, but there are many, many factors in the vote, and it's not just simply pulling a lever, it's a lot deeper than that. And I wanted to mention something about going from vote behavior, why the Tea Party is important to me. As an observer and experienced, I guess you'd say, warrior, because I've been involved in many, many battles. The separation of powers is a very special thing. When I think of the Tea Party, I think of the Constitution. I don't think of abortion. I don't think of same-sex marriage. I think of the Constitution. And basically, I think of the Tea Party, I'm giving you my political, sort of analytical framework. Secondly, I think of the Tea Party as what I call rolling back bad government. Somebody had better do it. Otherwise, it just continues on and on and on. And if there's not a force, a real political force that can say, somebody one time told me it may be legal, but is it right? We haven't moved into this, is it right, in my opinion, psychologically in the country. And we better start making those decisions. The Tea Party can help make that decision. But the separation of powers is really what's been lost. I've taught 1 year Texas A&M, and I asked something about the Electoral College. These were all seniors, political science majors, and they had no idea what happened if you didn't get a majority in the Electoral College. And I said, I turned to the professor, I said, what do you all teach them? Isn't that in the Constitution? Shouldn't you be able to read that? And they said, well, we just don't talk about the Constitution much anymore. And that's at Texas A&M. So I wanted to get back tonight, briefly, to the separation of powers and how important it is to me as a political scientist, as a political theorist, as an observer. But it is the central feature. It is the central feature. We can get pulled off on Second Amendments and Tenth Amendments, but the central feature of the U.S. Constitution is the separation of powers. And it's very important to know that we're talking about 2,000 years of learned history, or actually more than 2,000 years. Because in terms of the ancient theorists, they found out early that mixed government was better than any of the three governments the three forms that human nature had built at this time. One was a monarchy, that is the rule of one. One is the rule of the few, the aristocracies. And then there was the rule of the many, that is the democracies. Those are the three forms. And what happened was they started looking at this across history and found out that these forms degenerated. They decayed. And a monarchy usually decayed into abuse of power, and finally the aristocracy took over. You know the Magna Carta. If you've been down to exhibit down at the Museum of Natural Science, you'll read a lot about how the barons finally said, enough's enough. You can't keep taxing us, taking our workers off in our fields, serfs, and putting them into battle without us at least consenting to it. So the consent of the governed started then, 1215. It took 600 years to really get going. But just think of that. So back in the old days, Aristotle was the one that first talked about that it was a mixed form of government that was the best. Not too much monarchy, not too much aristocracy, not too much demos, that is the people. And what happened was these degenerated very naturally in these big cycles through world history. You had monarchies become tyrannies, you had aristocracies become oligarchies. Always the definition of an oligarchy is, I'm in power and I don't want you in my room. I've got all the power I need right here, you guys stay out. And then the third thing is democracies did degenerate occasionally into mob rule. And then the cycle started again. A strong demagogue came in, said I can take over this, I can bring order, and by the way you'll have to lose a few of your liberties, and then it'll establish a new rule of one, and that degenerates and keeps going down. These cycles kept going over again. So Madison and Jefferson and Adams kept looking at this history and said, you know what, the ancients had it right. Even the Roman Republic, and roughly around, I guess that would be around 350 BC, sent a delegation into Greece just to talk and look at all the documents that the various Greek city-states had done in terms of trying to make permanent good government. How do you make good government permanent? It's almost impossible. But they found out that they took a mixed form, as we know today, the executive, the judiciary, and the legislative forms, branches, and they found that they had a mix, and if it got out of balance, there was a big problem. They had to have a political revolution, and the Greeks had a word for political revolution. That didn't mean they shot anybody, but it means that they threw the people out and started over again because they were afraid that the cycle of degeneration would keep occurring. So, make a long story short, the Tea Party, in my opinion, is trying to focus on bringing the separation of powers back into balance. There's nothing really wrong with the United States or really wrong with our system of government. It's the Constitution is being re-engineered by the executive branch in this particular couple of terms where they're trying to get it out of balance. And if it gets out of balance, then that's where the Tea Party needs to step in because that will bring our country down. The catalyst, they claim, for this decay. Aren't you curious about why systems decay naturally over time, these forms of government over the last several thousand years? Well, they found out that it was what they called inherited succession. These are the privileges of government that get handed out to your friends. I remember when I went to the U.S. Census Bureau, they assigned me a secretary. And I said her name was Sally Rufo. Very nice. She'd been in the government for about 20 years. And it turned out her husband was a chauffeur for the director of the census, and she had 2 children working in the Census Bureau. Well, that's called a occupational community. I'm sure they were competent. But I'm telling you right now, the government won't last very long if that's the way you keep adding people. So to make a long story short, they said handing down government privileges is what starts the internal decay of any system. And you have to identify these. And we're finding this out, whether it's corruption in Washington or it's the good old boy system or it's looking the other way. Those are all types of inherited privileges where people don't pay attention and don't care to be committed. The solution, as we said, was to create a mixed government, a mixed constitution, where each branch checked the strengths and weaknesses of the other. And Aristotle said the better the constitution is mixed, the more permanent your government is. And indeed, the Roman Republic embraced this whole mixed constitution. It didn't last, did it? The last 400 years, we're about 250 years old. The Roman Republic lasted about 400 years. And then it internally fell apart based upon a lot of these privileges that I just mentioned in inventory. And then a demagogue came in, and that was Augustus Caesar, and he said he was benevolent, but it still became a dictatorship, and then never recovered since. So to make a long story short, what did the Founding Fathers do? When they got together, they knew they had a new country. They know it was a great experiment, and Jefferson was going all over Europe, finding every book he could find in governments, from antiquity and recent, like Montesquieu, etc., in all the various languages, and sending them over to America as fast as he could, so everybody would read this and get the idea that let's don't let history repeat itself. So they started a new government based on the separation of powers. And the Roman Republic, as I said, fell because it did not maintain the balance between those three branches. And what's today? Well, the size of the federal government is at center stage, more than it's ever been probably since the 30s. And that basically is built around unrestricted and unrestrained spending and unreformed entitlements. And if anybody says, what is the Tea Party about? And a lot of people are confused. A lot of people try to quickly say, oh, they're just a bunch of crazy social conservatives who are racist against Hispanics, and they don't want to, they're just like us. They just don't have a membership in the country club we're in. And that's about the way they think, and I'm tired of that. And we need to make this party more inclusive, because you can't win with 48%. By the way, just a quick little thing to keep in mind, the Republican Party today wins about 61% of the white vote. That is a landslide in electoral analysis. Anytime you get over 60%, it's pretty big. Well, 60% of 84% when Reagan got elected is a pretty good amount. But we didn't get all 60% of those days, but if you had 60% of 84%, you're just about winning every election, irrespective of Hispanics, minorities, etc. But today, the white vote is down to around 71% of the total composition of the electorate, and 60% is further down in the 40s. So we're going to have to make an adjustment, as any good business or any good organization does, and bring in some new voters, or we're not going to make it. And that, to me, obviously is the Hispanic voter. It's got to be brought in, or the party will not be here. There are models in Washington that I've seen that if we start getting less than 37%, that's not a lot to ask, folks. 37% of the Hispanic vote, as it's growing, will be out of business. And 10% of the electorate is Hispanic today. It was 1% when Reagan was elected in 1980. And that's how fast this America is changing. The last thing I want to say is that when you have the so-called privileged inheritances that are not working for the common person, you get the concentration of power being foremost in your mind. You get angry and frustrated, and then you want to basically believe, which is true, the Democrats are a threat to the country's freedom and to our ability to be safe. And right now, the Democrats believe we are just misguided, and we believe they are really ruining government itself. And these are the kinds of things, and the last thing I want to mention is that when you get into elections, what Tea Party finds out about themselves, that's the separation of powers, that's the improvement of, as I say, rolling back bad government. But you're working in an environment you're not really comfortable with yet, although this particular women's club seems to be doing pretty well. They're following some pretty smart strategies. And the vetting of candidates is absolutely critical. And because the first thing they're going to do is say, well, you didn't get the right candidate, therefore you dismissed the group. And that can't happen. We've got to have great candidates. And one of the things that you found out is that even though the separation of powers is an appeal to your reason with a capital R, that is your intellect, but campaigns are not run that way. They're run by emotion. The Democrats know how to make Republicans for the rich, that we don't care, so forth and so on, and we've been responding non-emotionally to those arguments, and it's brought the Republican Party down in a number of states that we should have won. So to make a long story short, Democrats believe government is the social savior, and Republicans stand in their way, and the Democrats Democrats want to change the world, whereas the Republican Party wants to basically fix systems. Now, if you want to fix systems, that's great. We'll get an engineering degree, but we better learn the emotionality in politics, why people vote. About 50% of what people do, they say in these post-election interviews, I voted for the person. I voted for somebody that represented change. It's personality driven. The other 50% are ideologically or belief system different. And guess what? Of that 50%, it's already canceled out. About 25% are hardcore adherents for the Republican Party, and 25% are hardcore for the Democratic Party. I've said also, by the way, 25% wants to run the rest of the country today. That's the liberal element. But the 50% are voting on personality, capability, competence, sense of change, all those things. So we've got to get smart in terms of campaigning, not just that we're right on the separation of powers, right on the best form of government. And we can stipulate very, very difficulty against the other side. that we do stand for the balance of separation of powers, and that will end up decaying our government if we don't stop it. So with that as a background, I wanted to make sure that we understood that it's the Constitution, it's not abortion, it's not legal aliens, and I could go on to all the various things. They're going to make somebody a winner. Now, I had a debate with a man the other night that said, well, if you take away abortion from the Republican Party, that's the biggest thing that differentiates us from the Democrats, and I'd rather be right than win. And that reminds me of stuff that was said 40 years ago. You'd think we're brighter than that today. You campaign on what gets you elected. You keep your belief system intact, but the election is built around emotion. It's not built around public policy per se. If you want to change public policy, go into government. Don't do it in an election. Anyway, with that as a background, tough as it may seem to some, but we've got to get our meaningful reference point to who we are. That is, the Tea Party stands for rolling back bad government. It stands for the balance and the separation of powers. Therefore, the Constitution is actually instrumental in everything we do and not be drifted off into other fights or other battles. And secondly, I think we need to realize that campaigns, in my opinion, because I've been in them, it's like you're talking to like a Marine captain who's been in about 7 different tours. And I tell you right now, it is a tough business, and people are right sometimes, and sometimes they're very venal, as you know, and it's a tough campaign. Once it's over, 51% puts you in office, and you can start talking about policy. But in my opinion, the Tea Party, historically and constitutionally, is right for America right now. It is right to be coming into the system, tweaking the change, bringing new people in, and if any organization, polity, union, church group doesn't bring in new regenerated people and new voters for the emotion in politics, then those organizations fail over the long term. Keep in mind, when people say, I can't believe they elected so-and-so, the Tea Party did, and I say, well, where's your vote? Did you get your vote out? Well, I guess we didn't. I just assumed our guy would win. And I said, well, you're not committed. And if you're not committed, you don't play in the game. And secondly, the country clubs are coming back again. I saw them back in the 50s and 60s when I grew up. The Republican Party met in the so-called proverbial phone booth or met in the country club grill. Those days are gone. Reagan brought it out. We're a very inclusive mass political party now, but I can start seeing this oligarchic tendency bringing us back into certain people want to control everything and the rest can stay out. So the Tea Party is very, very important historically to the country, in my opinion, and sits in a very favorable cycle with the past regenerated forces that we've had. All right, that's enough for me. On the book, just so you know, I was trying to maybe encapsulate a career nicely, but I was asked by another gentleman why are we losing these close elections, and one was, it just hit me that even though we bring up Reagan, and I drove up to Fort Worth one night just to hear Reagan back in '74, just because I knew that was a new thing coming. That's what I drove all night back to Austin to go back to my job. So Reagan was a really interesting, powerful, new breed of leader that we needed. You could feel it. And I think we're still looking for that in this particular age now. But to go back and try to regenerate Reaganism per se, it's changed. Reagan is gone in terms of our political history. And so we can look with a positive feeling about that, but we got to go something different, because that's been, what, 40 some odd years ago, just about. And then the second thing is the social issues, in my opinion, as an engineer, is killing us. Killing us not because we're right or wrong. We are right on social issues, but that's not the lead horse that you use to go into battle on. And if you do, you end up getting caught into various cul-de-sacs. You lose your flexibility in terms of all campaigns have won in the last 6 or 8 weeks, mostly. So you lose that engineering flexibility, and all we do is take the bait. Just like the bait that Obama gave us about, 6 weeks ago, that he was willing to listen to immigration reform. Well, that was a setup. Thank goodness the congressional Republicans said they're not going to do it, because he was trying to get us off our main themes in 14 and get us internally driven where we have divisive feelings again. So to make a long story short, we've got to do what we think's right. We've got to develop a more emotional, with our commitment, a more emotional attitude about how we get elections won. and we just quietly move the old guys over and bring the new guys in. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I didn't ask, take any questions.
Does anybody have any questions?
We had a candidates forum here just a couple of days ago, and one of the candidates got up and was touting his credentials, and he said, talked to one man, and the man said, yeah, but what's in it for me? How do we prove to the voters that what's in it for them? Better education, better jobs, better security, that we have a plan that's going to give them those things.
Well, let me say something about the complexity of government. Even the Democrats are saying, trying to negate some of the foibles they've been involved in, are saying it's just too complex nowadays. Government is complex, and the Democrats have proven they can run a complex organization. But we need to get the priorities straight. 3 or 4 things that really matter to people, stick with them and don't get off. And after the election's over, you can get off to a 5th or 6th or 7th issue. But between now and the election day itself, 3 or 4 issues is all people want to hear. Some of them just want to hear 2 issues. And not any more than that. That's number 1. And by the way, you better get these issues down to the priorities too. That's what polling's all about. Tell us, in surveys, what's the most important problem facing America today? What are 1 or 2 reasons you feel that way? Why did you pick some of these other things and you pick that? So you develop a real knowledge of where the inside the average voter is. But in terms of getting the issues, 1 is simplicity. 1 is the ones that are beneficial to us. And we, by the way, I mentioned abortion, but what about national security? I know we're going to be involved in this particular cycle with heavy national security. We've always won on that issue. America, by and large, the middle ground in America doesn't really trust Democrats on foreign policy. They think they'll negotiate, diplomatically throw everything away. And it's kind of a Neville Chamberlain kind of feeling they have. They haven't trusted Republicans on some of the so-called hot button issues of your personal economic security. And that's why this is probably would be classified down the road historically as a populist movement. And a populist movement is, where's the common sense in government? Where's the common man on the final output of these policies? Is anybody thinking along those lines? And so those are the kind of things that I think we ought to think about. But if you believe strongly in 2 or 3 things that we know are on solid ground, economy, education, etc., and by the time you put it together, guess what you're selling? You're selling yourself. Does that man, does he look like he really knows what he's talking about? Does he really care? Is he really going to make some changes? Is he going to stand in there when the wind's about 105 miles an hour? Is he going to run? Those are the things they end up ultimately making decisions. I've never seen a post-election survey yet that ever gave me an exact TV spot or an exact issue that they voted for this guy on or this woman on. They put, it's called the meta message. They kind of pull all this data together in their brain and they says, it's time for a change. B.O. Key used a great political scientist. He called it the responsible electorate. Most of the University of Michigan political science professors were saying voters are dumb. They don't understand what's going on. All they do is just vote their party ID. And B.O. Key said, I don't believe so. They made the right change throughout American history when they had to. It would have been Andy Jackson created flipped the entire political system on its head because those privileged inheritances had worked their way in for about 30 years after the great election of 1800. So there are these things happen. But anyway, it's the personality, it's the looking the person in the eye. I really believe that's why it's the type of candidate that you've got to get. Most candidates that are in our field, our so-called community, are going to be pretty solid in their belief systems. If they've got a weird one, they need to be vetted out. I went to New York to talk with the U.S. Senate candidate, was one of the Loeb family people a long time ago, and I said, what's your #1 theme? Why are you running for U.S. Senate? I want to monetize the federal debt. And I said, that's great. Over the next 30 years you do that, but I said, I'm leaving because you'll never get elected on that issue alone. We need to make sure we have the right candidates, we have the right belief system that can actually project their beliefs, project to the voter that they really care. And if we can do that in an emotionally laden environment that we work in, not a public policy environment, not where reason is, but where there's more emotion in elections, then we can win. But just like anybody says, you could go to the Super Bowl with a weak defensive end or a weak running back, but you can never go to the Super Bowl with a weak quarterback. So you better get those candidates straight. Or anything else? Yes, sir.
Actually, I think we're probably saying the same thing, but when you're speaking about being able to communicate in an emotional manner, I understand that from the perspective of what actually affects the people who vote. I guess if you're in the position of what groups like this do, and looking at analyzing and vetting candidates, it seems to be being able to get the message across in an emotional manner is to some extent derivative. Isn't it the idea of what William F. Buckley said, there's a difference between someone who's conservative and someone who's a conservative. Someone who's a conservative, who lives and eats and breathes these principles, will be able to communicate it naturally with emotion. So isn't that really what groups like us should be looking for?
Yeah, you want somebody committed, but you want somebody that can obviously project that commitment and want to be elected. That's a different thing than writing a platform or writing some kind of a speech for a candidate. I would just say, based on what you're saying, is that as I've looked at the history of the United States voting system in the last 30 years, we have about 27% of the electorate, 131 million last time, that are very conservative. They say, I am not somewhat, I'm not moderate, I am very conservative, whatever that means. And then you have another 24 to 23% that say they're very liberal, or somewhat liberal. I don't know, as long as they say liberal, they're over there. And then you have, what do you have left? Obviously you have a gigantic group, almost 40%, that say they're somewhat conservative. That's the old center-right, and America's supposed to be center-right, and not center-left. Obama's running the country as it's left-left, but it's actually a center-right country. But those people, that 35–40%, don't always vote. And they get mad about every 10 years, but they don't get mad every 2 years. That's what you want. So that's kind of where we're challenged. We have our activists, they have our activists, and we know that the middle ground is where we need to go, but we haven't found the right connect on some. And then there were 7 million white voters, not just any voters, 7 million white voters who voted in 08 that did not vote in 12. People still can't understand it. And I haven't seen a good research analysis yet on why those people stayed home. But the commitment wasn't there.
They don't think there's a time.
By the way, we are indeed and I'm saying this in the most attractive, positive definition, a populist movement. Remember, we had some wild populism in the 20s and 1890s that caused a lot of reforms in government, but it was pretty left-wing, almost closer to the Communist Party than anything else in those days. But the populist movement is also conservative. People that in the media don't write about it. That's what Reagan brought in. He was somebody from the working classes that said, where is the common sense in what was done? And I'll never forget, Jack Fields told me one last thing, that he was, congressman was in with Reagan when they were trying to get Reagan one day. He was in the office with about 6 or 10 others to sign the Law of the Sea Treaty that all the European countries had signed off on. And that would have basically given the United Nations the sovereignty over all the seas, and it would have pushed our so-called length of mileage out from the coast further inland. And they said he sat there and looked at the document, and Alexander Haig's one that presented it to him, and he said, well, I didn't think America voted for us to do this sort of thing. And everybody was stunned because they thought he had signed it. And everybody was, he said, why your pin dropped? And he said, I wasn't elected to do this sort of thing. And they said, yes, Mr. President, that's exactly what we will reject it. But I mean, that's how close that came to getting put into play. So that's the kind of people we need, in my opinion, that can say, these are my beliefs and this is what we need to do. Yes, ma'am.
With the statement for someone running for the presidential election, saying the common man is being deeply burdened by the current federal government, would that be enough to be?
Well, that's a nice thing, but you better have some facts underneath it. And,
Well, true,
right.
but you're saying you need about 2 topics. Is that?
Well, I'm
could that
thinking
be
more
one?
on the healthcare system being one, obviously, and maybe a generation of our power abroad would be another. That's not local, but I'm thinking about this national midterm elections coming up. No, the debt too, that's and by the way, keep in mind, what we've got to do is say that the Democratic Party is now the party of Washington DC. You live in Washington DC, if you live in Washington DC, I want you to vote Democrat. And that's what you need to do. We're the outside party. We should never put on our ticket ever again on senator or congressman. Now, I'm saying that as an abstraction, but I don't want people that come out of that system, because that's not what we are. And what happened to us in 12, in a word, is we had an insurgency, a populist insurgency that welled up in 2010, just like we did in '94. And how many congressmen, does anybody know how many congressmen flipped, that is, went from Democrat to Republican in one little midterm election called 2010? 63. That's huge. 15 or 16 congressmen sometimes moving in midterms is a big deal, but 63. So there was a surge, a momentum, and it got lost. And he got lost in 212. We had an elitist, as fine a man as he was, we had an elitist trying to lead a populist revolution. It doesn't really sink. And so we better start thinking about outsiders. These governors are elected. We're going to find a new Reagan pretty soon. And it's probably going to come out of the governorships, and you have to look at all the elections in 14 for that. Yes, Mark?
Republican David Jolly wins a special election in Florida.
Money in the DNC and the media put into that race. Yeah, that's right. Well, that's going to be a big deal, because everybody was looking at it as an interpretive event, and the Democrats were holding on for dear life on that one, so they wouldn't allow a lot of other Democrats to start. I bet you there are Democrats going out the back door all across America. But anyway, the Tea Party, don't let anybody ever think that the Tea Party doesn't have an historic, significant part to play in regenerating the American system. And it has to stand on the separation of powers, keeping it in balance. You can talk about those issues, how it's been out of balance, which branches are putting it out of balance, and scaring people that way, because that will happen. It will decay. And then we can take from that into some other issues, but keep it simple. Make sure you understand the emotionality between you and your voters. And remember, a voting decision is a big deal to a voter. People don't make it lightly. These people get swept in and swept out, and we sometimes think, well, that's just the waves of the ocean. These are deeply held psychological reasons people switch their votes, change their votes, split their ticket, etc. Yes, sir.
Seems like you have no focus on the agenda and targets to do it. I kind of go back to what did it do with Contract with America, you know what I'm saying? It was simple, targeted, and explainable, I guess, you know what I'm saying? But we have no leaders in Washington right now that they just want to sit down and throw their hands and wait for the day to come and go.
Part of the problem with when I was working the system, so some of these are friends, but part of the problem is that on the Republican side, and I do like this idea they're going from opposition party to alternate, creating an alternative party to what's been done. That's a better possible way to say it. But by and large, a lot of these people aren't very tough. And let me tell you, this is a tough game. The Chicago crowd's proved it. The Clinton, Arkansas crowd has proved it. It is a tough game. And if anybody doesn't like contact or wants to go to the sidelines after they've got hit pretty hard the first time in a football game, they don't need to be playing football. And that's why we have to have tough candidates, and we have to have good, solid belief systems, and not get pulled off to the sidelines on some of these issues. I heard the other day where a Republican candidate was over in the Midwest on the abortion issue said, and thank goodness he hasn't been, won't be nominated, but the press picked it up. If we're going to allow abortion on a man, why don't we just allow rape? Why do candidates running for midterm elections for the federal government need to get into personal issues? The days of the social conservatives that didn't know where to go came in with Reagan. They're in the party. Our culture has been mostly maintained. It's not under, our government system is under attack, but the culture turned out to be pretty damn resilient. And so I want to get away from that, get more into the economy, the debt, unrestricted spending, all the things that are going on, plus a strong national security. Those issues will get you elected at the national level. Local level, same thing. Keep thinking about what is important to people in their own personal life. Let me borrow first.
Lance, I was told you were gonna start speaking at 7. Sorry I missed most of your speech.
Didn't miss it.
But is it too early to call a top 2 or top 3 of these governors you're
Yeah.
talking about?
Yeah, it's too early. I'd like to see a lot, there are gonna be some big elections this year, and they're gonna be hard for you to pull it all together, because we got, was it 36 governors, I think, up, and you got 33 US senators up, and then you got technically probably about 40 competitive congressional districts. If you're interested, we talk about why the other 390-something are not competitive. And then you've got roughly 3,000 legislators that will be elected. 3,000 scattered all over the states. So, in all that, I would like to sift through that in 14 to see if somebody can move right into the 16 race. I'm a little bit, I guess you'd say a little bit disappointed that we don't have a real power out there. The Northeast had all but anointed Christie, and then the media had all but anointed Rand Paul, because they want those two to divide the party up. And I suggested in my book on how to win and change the America that that setup doesn't feel comfortable to me. I think there's a third way, there's another candidate out there, and they will surface. If you win a big state election and a big vote, you're going to be pushed forward. And I just think it's going to be a wild ride, because we don't have people already anointed. And the Democrats, think about what the Democrats have to worry about. They've got another anointed candidate this time in Hillary. She isn't going to be anointed again. When I say again, meaning she was supposed to have been anointed prior, but she forgot about caucus delegates. And they all had counted on their win, I think, in D.C. before they really went to Iowa, so to speak. But nevertheless, she's anointed. After 2 terms of any Democratic-Republican administration, the benefit generally goes to the out party. A lot of people think it's time to bring in some new blood. You've got that going. You've got the Obamacare, which Democrats are fleeing by the hour. You've got national security that people are beginning to wonder. By the way, this is why a lot of intellectual Democrats switched parties when Reagan came in. They were so disgusted with the McGovern lay down, diplomatic first and arms second, that a lot of these intellectuals moved. Irving Kristol, Bill Kristol's dad, they all moved, the entire group moved over in Washington toward the Republican side for a stronger national defense, because he thought the Democrats were giving the country away. But we have the same thing working again. So these are all things that are going to really have a hard time for the Democrats to win with. If they don't have something to crest, like a wave, crest in, like they did in 2008 with the new voter and the new technology and hope, rather than all this other stuff, if they don't have a crest, then what do they have to do? They have to demonize and divide the opponent party. And that's what they're getting ready to do, and the media will help them. Yes, sir.
What about Ted Cruz? He's even better than Ronald Reagan, I think.
Well, that remains to be seen.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't put a pitcher that's pitched games in high school, put him in the major leagues. Yes. He's got long-term possibilities, but so do a lot of other people. And I want to make double sure that we have the right person at the right time. It may be it may be that he is the best candidate, but I'm reserving judgment. I don't want to make any prior judgments until we see who they are and how good they are. You had a question there.
Oh, well, I think Rand Paul's allure there, I think the Republican Party would be remiss if they didn't really understand that, while they want a strong national defense, they have no stomach to get into nation building overseas, so they had better make sure that they understand that. And the other is the surveillance between the IRS, even young people. I mean, generally, nobody likes the kind of surveillance by an IRS, by the NSA, that they're doing domestically, and people are afraid of it. I mean, across the board.
All these
Everything.
issues
Yeah.
accumulate into kind of a pro-change feeling, but it still takes a lever to be pulled on 1 or 2 other issues. But this has all been building. Isn't it interesting how the election system, if not maybe America, you switch, you kind of move from one pendulum, and if it's too much, you move back to the other pendulum. And you can sense that history is starting to change. People have just realized that it didn't go like they thought. buyer's remorse everywhere in this particular electorate. And let's see how we win at 14. If we win, I want to make a real strong statement here, strategically from a national point of view. If the Republican Party doesn't win the Senate, you pack your bags and go home. If the Republican Party doesn't win the U.S. Senate, that is, get 6 Senate seats or more, and right now they're running ahead in 10. That's how good the system's looking right now. If they don't win control of the Senate, where they can put a consensus between the House and the Senate, give that to the White House, it'll be vetoed. They run on that at 16. You can win with that package. But if we don't have the power in the Senate, it won't work. And that's why it's absolutely critical. Anybody wants to trip $100, you better, don't give it to a presidential candidate, get it to somebody running for the Senate this time. Yes, sir.
Well, you better watch Rand Paul, in my opinion. He backed off a little bit, cease pact or whatever that thing on the Michael Mendez show today. But let me tell you, he is coming across as an anti-security guy, and you've got to watch Gail here is worried about that, but I don't think that's the key issue. But I'll tell you, amen, brother, to what you said about abortion. Now because you are absolutely right. I have been in politics a long time, and I've seen these pro-lifers. Where's Toth when we really need it?
How could it be any closer to you?
She is driving this pro-life issue real bad. And look, you're going to lose if you get on that issue. You've already lost the white. There's a gender gap with white females, especially single. It's destroyed many campaigns that I've seen. The pro-lifers get in there, they're just going to have their way. They become bullets. You are absolutely right. You are stating the right position. Now, Toth, what do you have to say about that?
Calm down.
Let me say, historically, and I'm looking at this as a political scientist, believe it or not, the pro-life movement, which started roughly in the 80s and so forth, and they had a lot to do with the evangelical movement in the party, etc. Actually, when you really look at it hard cold, it's actually been a positive for the Republican Party. Now that's up to about, I want to say roughly 1996 or maybe 2000. And the reason is a lot of lower class, and there are lower class Catholics around the country, in these inner cities and in the Midwest, etc., all decided the Democratic Party was way out there for them. They were no longer attractive because their mother and dad were Democrats. Sorry, got to move. That net exchange, we lost a lot of Republican elite women, particularly in California, upper class women who said, I want to be with the new age. But the net of that, we came out about 0.2, they claimed, about 2 percentage points ahead on this gigantic cross. Now the cross has been done. It's over with. The cross has been done. You don't have the effective engineering and fighting going on in primaries and precincts over that issue. The two forces changed. Now it's a matter of delimiting some of the more divisive issues and winning on the ones that actually win. And pretty soon the group will all come back together. But the abortion issue was important. It did change a lot of votes, particularly in certain parts of the rural areas of this country, but that's over with. We need to start winning in the suburban areas, and guess what? Young people and women, etc., live in the suburbs heavily. And the rural part of the United States is about 90% Republican now. I mean, it is unbelievable. Somebody told me there were 86 county judge positions that were automatic. Out of 254 counties in Texas, Democrats didn't even run. How can you believe a Democrat 30 years ago didn't run for county judge? So it just shows you how the state is flipped. Well, we've done our work. It's all set in place. Now we need to add new voters. And new voters to me are Hispanic voters that are, as George Bush one time said, that the guy will walk 300 miles without his shoes to try to support his family. Maybe we ought to consider putting that down in our party. And we've got to do something. I notice the Democrats are using legal status now for veterans, children of veterans. They're trying to head us off because that's where we're going. No legal, but no amnesty. And we're trying to find that midpoint to bring us in. The Democrats or Obama's already trying to cut us off at the pass on that. But that's the biggest issue in the Republican Party's growth, is Hispanic vote. We've already grown with the abortion pro-life group. We've already grown with evangelicals. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And we've already grown in a few other areas. Conservative Democrats, by the way, there are not many conservative Democrats left. Now, there are not many moderate Republicans left either. Yes, sir.
Have you done any, and I'm getting here late, so I apologize, but have you done any research around the human trafficking issue?
No, I haven't, but I can't believe that wouldn't be what we call a valence issue. A valence issue is everybody believes it. Remember when the Republicans wanted to make crime their big issue, and the Democrats said, well, we don't like crime either, you know. And pretty soon that big issue kind of filtered out because we didn't have a vote determinant. Vote determinant is there are people that don't agree with you, there are people that do agree with you, and the ones that agree with you should be able to overwhelm the others. But that should be a valence issue that everybody agrees with. Now, whether that's the number one issue in your life space is beyond me. That may be good once you're in power, it may be good to show that you're making changes, but if you get an election won on emotionality, unless there was some trafficking going on right in your family where you have a personal story to give, those are issues that to me are in the second tier.
It's an issue for young evangelical kids and churches across the state of Texas, where Democrats are getting the upper hand because they're playing the issue. In 1973, abortion became legal, as Walter just pointed out, and it was an issue for my generation, but it's not an issue for the next generation coming along. Their issue is human trafficking. It's a tremendously huge issue, and we're not even giving it lip service in the Republican Party.
Well, it ought to be. Those are second generation issues, I agree with. By the way, one last thing. I wrote this book on how Republicans can win and changing America. I was trying to shake the Republican Party up, but let's get on with the new world, the new age. Reagan was great, but he's not here. Social issues were great, but they're not winning today. We need to find candidates from the outside, not the inside. So over and over again, I make that theme and try to say that it's time to wake up. I told somebody that said, well, what would be your so-called sponsor for this historically? And I said, well, it's not Thomas Jefferson, it's Thomas Paine. In other words, Thomas Paine told everybody in America, we got it right, we know what we're supposed to do, now get out there and do it. And then the second book we're getting ready to do for the 15 will be, don't laugh, Breaking Republican. And basically it's on how Republicans can win local elections. And if nothing else, it would be a book that will tell us all the ways that you can win at the local level, ways you can get mistreated by the press and what to watch out for, but also to maybe help vet candidates in the vetting process, because you can take them through this book and see if they're knowledgeable, if they got a sixth sense. I'll leave you on this one thing. A company that I work some with did nothing but pick their whole psychology. We're all psychologists, and they would help NFL teams pick the right quarterback. We know what's going on in Houston now with that. Or pick the right goal hockey, the goaler in hockey and so forth. And what they did, they went out and interviewed all the best people they could find in that field. It could be a ticket person at the airport, cashing your ticket in to get on the plane. It was any kind of occupation. They found out who were the best people. Everybody knew who the best people were in that field. They did a psychological profile of what made them so good, and then they used that to interview other people to find out if they matched up close enough or not. And many times they'd have to say, this quarterback just doesn't have it. He's tall, he's strong, but he doesn't have some of those inner characteristics. They found the inner characteristics, and this helps you pick candidates, I hope. Like they could say that the quarterback could see the pass completed even though it had just left his hand. He had a mental view of the whole field, where the guy was running to, where the pass had to go, even though he was knocked down. He never saw the pass completed. They had this unique ability to see where that was going. We can do the same thing in elections. We can get candidates that can sense their belief system and how it connects to the average voter. And that's what you need to find. Okay.
Lance, where can we get your book? Where can we get your book?
You sound like a shill.
I do.
Thank you. I don't even think about those things, but it's on
Amazon.
Amazon.com and Barnes & Noble. I think you have to look at the title, How Republicans Can Win and Change America. It's not very long. It has a lot of meat in there on how people win and lose over the last 30 years. And you can get it from that. And it's self-published, which is fascinating, which you can do nowadays. But and then Barnes & Noble or Amazon, they print these books and send them out. You don't get them 2 days later, you get them about 6 days later, but they still do it all.
What does it cost?
You should know, how many of you?
Not to shoot him.
It's very inexpensive, when you self-publish and don't go through.
$12.
New York Publishing,
$10 to
thing, it's
$12.
about $10 or $11, so it's not much at all. I can, a little bit.
Yeah, you have to do. Yeah, they can't be honest.
I'll be able to answer any question outside too, but I don't want to disturb the meeting, but anyway, go for it. Thanks.